India is the fifth largest economy in the world. By some estimates, it's even fourth largest economy in the world. And soon it will become third largest economy in the world. Now, the thing is, how do we come up with these rankings? How do we come up with these rankings? Okay. What do we measure to say that India is the fifth largest, fourth largest, third largest economy? Basically, we compare the GDP, gross domestic product, of all countries, and the country which has the highest GDP gets rank 1, the second highest, second rank, third highest, third rank, and so on and so forth. So if we say that India has the fourth largest, India is the fourth largest economy in the world, we are basically saying that India has the fourth largest GDP in the world. And soon it will have the third largest. But the question is, which many UPSC aspirants get wrong. They don't have conceptual clarity with respect to what is GDP. At the base of it, what is GDP? And what do we need to do to increase it? Okay, so in today's UPSC Nuggets lecture, we will talk about what is GDP, and then we will talk about what are the major drivers of GDP, which factors increase GDP. It's a very important topic, so please pay close attention. Hello and welcome to Jumbo IS, and welcome to this brand new lecture series called UPSC Nuggets. Now in today's UPSC Nuggets lecture, we will talk about GDP, Gross Domestic Product. Everyone knows the full form of GDP, but very few people understand what GDP actually is. And if you don't understand what GDP actually is, then you won't be able to understand what drives it, which factors are responsible for its increase or decrease, right? So today, in a very short span of time, I will try to explain this conceptual matter to you. Okay, so let's begin. What drives GDP? But to understand what drives GDP, we need to know what GDP is. First of all, I will reveal to you what almost every one of you knows. The full form of GDP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. Almost everyone knows this. But what is this gross domestic product and how is it an indicator of an economy? Okay, so let's take a look at the formal definition of gross domestic product. So GDP, pay close attention. Each and every word of this definition is important. Okay, it is the monetary value of total amount of final goods, and let's add services over here. Final goods and services produced in the domestic territory of an economy in a specific period of time. Okay, now notice carefully that I've underlined a few words. Okay, I've underlined the word final, I've underlined the word domestic territory, and I've underlined the word specific period of time. Okay, there is a reason why I've underlined them. Okay, I'll come to those reasons, but let's first unpack what do we mean by this. Okay, look, every economy, every country produces certain goods. Pen, microwave oven, cars, phones, laptops. There are so many goods that people buy which are produced by producers to sell. Okay. Similarly, many producers produce services. Okay. Entertainment services, educational services, tourism services, grooming services. Okay. You go to a shop to cut your hair, those are grooming services, and many more services, IT services, financial services, all these services. And these services are produced to sell. Clear? So every country produces goods and services. And these goods and services are sold at a price. Yes, basically these goods and services are being produced to earn money, to sell and earn money, right? So these goods and services are being sold at a price. Now let's suppose in India, okay, we produce n number of goods and services, okay, and these goods and services are being sold at a price. The total monetary value of all goods and services produced in India is India's GDP. Again, I'll explain this with an example. Okay, very small example, hypothetical example, it's not real, but it will help you understand this concept. Let's suppose in the entire country of India, in 1 year, okay, in 1 year, we just produce 5 of these pens. We produce these pens and that's it. We produce 5 pens. We don't produce anything at all. We just produce these 5 pens. The price of each pen is 10 rupees. Okay, so we shall say that India's GDP is 50 rupees. Simple, that's what GDP is. Obviously, in real life, we do not produce pen. We produce pens, phones, laptops, fridge, cars, so many things, right? You add their monetary value. Add the monetary value. And what is the monetary value of a good? Price. Add the monetary value of all goods and services produced in India. Okay? In 1 year. You add all of that. And that will give you the GDP. So GDP is basically nothing. It's just the monetary value of all goods and services produced in India. Clear? Now we'll come to these underlined words. Okay? First of all, why I have underlined the word final? Because we add the value of only final goods. Goods are of two types. Intermediate goods, which are mostly raw material. To produce this pen, we required plastic. Plastic is intermediate good. And final goods. Final good is this pen, right? We only add the monetary value of final goods. Remember, final goods and services. Next, domestic territory. Only those goods and services will be included which are produced in India's borders. Okay? There are many Indian companies who produce goods and services abroad. Okay, in USA, Africa. Those goods and services won't be part of India's GDP. Only those goods and services which were produced within India's borders would be calculated in India's GDP. Hence, the word domestic territory is important. Okay, and then specific period of time. The specific period of time is very important because we are calculating how much goods and services are produced, but we need to specify the time. How much goods and services are being produced in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 months, in 6 months, right? We need to specify time period. If the time period is 1 year, we say we are calculating annual GDP of India. But you all know that we also calculate quarterly GDP. If the time period is 3 months, we are basically calculating quarterly GDP. Right? So time period is important, but generally that time period is 1 year only. So we are habitual of calculating annual GDP, but sometimes we also calculate quarterly GDP as well. Okay? So this is the basic definition of GDP. I have quickly explained it to you. Okay? But I hope you understood. If you did not, please ask me your doubts. Okay? Now this is GDP. So if India is the 4th largest economy in the world, that means the total amount of goods and services produced in India are 4th largest. Okay? We produce a lot of goods and services in 1 year. That's what makes us 4th largest economy. Now the biggest question is, they're all saying that India will soon become 3rd largest economy. Okay? And India traveled a long way. At one point of time, we were not even in the top 10 list. We became 5th, 4th, and now soon we'll become 3. Okay? So what is driving our GDP growth? Which factors are responsible for GDP growth? Okay? So today I'm going to explain to you drivers of economic growth. So pay close attention, okay? Drivers of economic growth. Now listen to me carefully. You see, you now know that GDP is equal to total amount of goods and services. Okay? But how do we know that this much amount of goods and services are produced in 1 year? How do we know that? How do we calculate that? Do Government of India officials travel to every house and check how many goods they have, how many goods they are produced? Do they count each and every good and service? Okay, and write their price down and then calculate it, add it? Do they do that? Absolutely not. There are various ways of calculating GDP, But one way of calculating GDP is calculating the total expenditure. You see, these goods and services are produced to sell in the market. So if we basically calculate the amount of expenditure done by Indians in 1 year, we will calculate the value of the amount of goods and services produced. For example, if India produced 5 pens worth rupees 10 each, okay, India's GDP was 50 rupees. How do we calculate this GDP? We will calculate how much money was spent by Indians in 1 year. It will come out to be 50 rupees because that money was spent on goods and services only. Right? Make sense? Now listen to me carefully. So there is one way of calculating GDP, and that is by calculating the expenditure done on goods and services produced in India. Okay? Now, there are 4 types of expenditures done on Indian goods and services. One is consumers in India, people like you and me. Okay? They basically spend money to buy goods and services. That is known as consumer expenditure. Okay? Then, there are various investors in India, government investors as well as private investors in India, which buy investment related goods, okay, capital goods. They do investment, and when they do investment expenditure, they buy goods and services. Okay, so let's call it investment expenditure. Then, government also does a lot of expenditure. You all know about this. Government spends a lot of money, and that too on goods and services, right? So that would be government expenditure. And then there are some goods, listen to me carefully, there are some goods that Indians don't buy, foreigners buy. So foreigners are doing that expenditure on India. So if I make this pen and export it abroad, okay, so foreigners are spending that money on me, Indian, right? So exports are also expenditure done on Indian goods, right? So this is export expenditure, X. Clear? And now please pay close attention. I will give you a formula for GDP and you have to remember it forever. Okay? This will clear a lot of things for you. GDP is equal to C, which is consumer expenditure, I, which is investment expenditure, plus government expenditure, plus X. X stands for exports, minus M. M stands for imports. This is your GDP. Consumer expenditure, investment, government expenditure, exports minus imports. So if people in India start spending more, GDP will increase. If investments in India increase, GDP will increase. If government starts to spend a lot of money, GDP will increase. If India's exports increase, GDP will increase. But if India's imports increase, GDP will decrease. Because imports act as leakage in your economy. The more India imports, bad it is for India. The more India exports, the more benefits will accrue out of it. Its GDP would increase. Clear? So remember this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 drivers of Indian economy. And one more thing. Imports act as leakage in your economy. Exports act as injection in your economy. That is why every government's policy is to maximize exports, minimize imports. Clear? These are the 4 drivers. So if India wants to become the 3rd largest economy, well, India's GDP has to increase. And GDP is dependent on these 4 things. It's like GDP is sitting on these 4 legs of a table. Okay? Consumption is one leg, investment is another, government expenditure is another, and this X minus M is known as net exports. This is another. That is why India is sad that America has levied tariffs on it. Why? Because if America levies tariffs on India, Indian exports would decline. That would be harmful for our GDP. One more example. Do you know when there is recession, you see that government increases its expenditure during recession. Why? Well, during recession, people like you and me don't have any money. So consumer expenditure declines. Investors in India also don't have any money. Well, their investments also decline. So to save the GDP, government expenditure has to increase, and that is why government increases its spending during recession times. Remember, these are the four drivers of economic growth. If people in India will earn more money, they will spend more. C will increase. And because C will increase, private investors will invest more in India. I will increase. Okay? GDP will increase. Also, if exports increase, GDP will increase. Well, China applied this strategy. Do you know what is the economic model of China? Export led growth. China's economy grew because of its exports and investment. India is consumption driven economy. Around 60% of India's GDP comes from consumption only. But these are many facts that we'll cover later. As of now, just focus on what is GDP and what are the four drivers of GDP. Okay, I hope I simplified this for you. But let me say this with emphasis. If you have any doubts, use the comment section judiciously. Okay, I'm here to help you out. If you have any doubts, write those doubts down in your comment section and I will be happy to entertain them. Okay, so do that and wait for the next lecture in this lecture series called UPSC Nuggets. I'll see you next time.